This story is a work of fiction inspired by real events. It reimagines historical figures and modern cases for creative purposes. The characters and their actions, including Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson, are fictionalized and not intended to accurately represent real-life individuals, events, or outcomes. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or deceased, or real-life events is purely coincidental. The content is designed for entertainment and storytelling purposes only and does not claim to offer factual conclusions or insights into the real-life case of JonBenét Ramsey. Viewer discretion is advised, as the subject matter may be sensitive to some audiences.
In the annals of crime, there are few cases as perplexing, as haunting, as the tragic death of JonBenét Ramsey, a child found lifeless in the basement of her own home, a ransom note written within the walls of the house, and a family cloaked in a veil of suspicion and sorrow. Decades have passed, and yet the answers remain elusive. But what if the greatest mind of deduction, the consulting detective himself, Sherlock Holmes, were called upon to untangle this web of lies, secrets, and grief? What truths would he uncover? What shadows would he chase? Join us now as we step beyond time and place to witness Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson investigate the mystery of JonBenét Ramsey in What If Sherlock? The Ramsey Case. The game, dear listener, is afoot.
Good evening. How may I assist you? I must say, you seem to have travelled a distance, judging by the wear on your boots and the smudge of dust on your coat. Please, do come in.
Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, you're needed. A case from America. The death of a child, JonBenét Ramsey. The circumstances are unusual.
A child, you say? What's so unusual about it?
The police are baffled. A ransom note, but no abduction. The child's body was found in the home. The family, well, they're under suspicion, but nothing is clear.
Fascinating. Watson, pack your bag. The game, as they say, is afoot.
And here I thought I'd finally have a chance to finish my book tonight.
Literature can wait, my dear Watson. Murder, as always, refuses to take a holiday.
And so, with the bitter cold of a Colorado winter ahead of them, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson embarked on their latest challenge. The quiet warmth of 221B Baker Street gave way to the snow-dusted streets of Boulder, where the Ramsey home stood as both a grieving house and a puzzling crime scene.
America, Holmes. It's a far cry from Baker Street. Do you ever wonder how you'd manage as a detective in a land so vast?
Every land has its secrets, Watson. It's the people who remain the same. Cunning, desperate, careless. No matter the setting, the clues reveal themselves to those who know how to look.
I only hope this journey isn't for naught. A ransom note, but no abduction. It sounds almost theatrical.
Theatrical, perhaps. But every performance has its author. Let us see what the Ramsey home has to reveal.
Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson. I'm Detective Reynolds. I trust you've been briefed on the basics.
Only the basics, Detective. A child found dead in the home, a ransom note left behind. Tell me, what have you made of the scene?
Not much. The ransom note was written on their notepad. The parents say they have no idea what happened, but their stories don't quite align. The basement's where we found the body.
A tragic affair, Holmes, to lose a child this way.
Tragic, yes, but sentiment must not cloud deduction. Lead the way, Detective.
This way, gentlemen. Mr. Holmes, this is the ransom note we found inside the Ramsey home.
2.5 pages, unusual length for a ransom note. Watson, read it aloud if you would.
We are a small foreign faction. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. Holmes, this figure. It's rather precise.
Yes, Mr. Ramsey's recent bonus, I presume.
That's correct. It's public knowledge. It was even printed in the business section of the local paper.
Interesting. A precise amount tied to a recent event. Hardly coincidental. And yet, the mention of a small foreign faction strikes a curious note. Detective, do you have any evidence to suggest foreign involvement?
None. No foreign connections, no suspicious visitors. The family has no known ties to anything of the sort.
The wording itself is odd. We are a small foreign faction. It sounds deliberately vague.
Deliberate indeed. The phrasing suggests someone attempting to fabricate an exotic threat. It's designed to divert suspicion outward, yet it lacks specificity, a hallmark of amateur deception.
And the length, Holmes. Most ransom notes are brief, straight to the point. Why take the time to write 2.5 pages?
Why indeed? Length invites scrutiny, which is precisely what a genuine criminal would seek to avoid. Detective, keep me abreast of the handwriting analysis.
An intruder wouldn't take the time to write a note here, would they? That would be reckless.
Precisely, an intruder would not. This was crafted in a setting of safety and control. The true question, Watson, is why? Why go to such lengths to stage this elaborate charade?
Perhaps to throw suspicion away from themselves, or to buy time.
Both plausible motives. But there is more here. The language itself. Execution, beheadings. It smacks of melodrama, almost as if the writer were drawing from some cheap crime novel.
So you believe this note was written by someone in the house?
The evidence points inward, Detective. The note is not merely an object, it is a message. Every detail, the handwriting, the length, the choice of words, was calculated. Someone crafted this note to tell a story, and it is our task to unravel the truth it seeks to conceal.
Holmes, what of the repeated instructions about the money? They seem to emphasize haste.
A fascinating contradiction, Watson. The writer insists on urgency, yet spends an extraordinary amount of time crafting this note. A contradiction often reveals a deeper truth. Mark my words, Watson, the answers lie not in the note itself, but in the contradictions it carries. Detective Reynolds, the ransom note tells one story, but the truth often lies where words fail. I would like to see the location where the body was discovered. Such a scene can reveal far more than the most elaborate statement.
Yes, Mr. Holmes, down there near the far corner.
Then let us proceed. Lead the way, if you would. Now, Detective, I trust nothing has been disturbed since the body was removed.
No, the room has been sealed since the initial investigation.
Good. Then let us see what secrets this basement holds. Look here. Dust undisturbed. No footprints leading to or from the window. This window, Watson, was broken after the fact. A hasty attempt to feign a forced entry.
Staged then, like the note.
Precisely. Staging suggests panic, an act of desperation rather than premeditation. But the question remains, why? Why go to such lengths to construct an elaborate lie?
Good heavens, Holmes. What kind of monster would...
A monster, perhaps? Or someone desperate enough to hide a mistake?
A mistake. But Holmes, how could such brutality ever be considered a mistake?
A mistake born of fear, Watson. Fear of exposure, fear of loss. Fear can drive the most unthinkable acts. See here, an indentation in the floor, faint traces of fibers. The body was placed here deliberately, almost reverently. This was no random act of violence.
But surely, Holmes, this points to someone familiar with the child, perhaps even a member of the household.
That, Watson, is the most troubling possibility of all. This crime was not committed by a stranger. Every detail in this room points to someone who knew her, someone who cared enough to conceal their actions. The garrote, the blanket, the very placement of the body, it all suggests a tragic intimacy.
What kind of mind could live with such a burden? To construct a web of lies while carrying such guilt.
The human mind is a labyrinth, Watson. Some can bear the weight of their sins, others crumble under its strain. Our task is to ensure the truth finds the light, no matter how dark it may be. Detective Reynolds, before we leave this room, there's one crucial detail I must understand. Who discovered the body?
It was Mr. Ramsey himself. He claimed he searched the house after the ransom note was found, starting in the basement. That's when he discovered her.
Interesting. The father searches the house and ends up here. Alone, I presume.
Yes, he carried her upstairs after finding her. Mrs. Ramsey and a friend were present at the time.
Then it is imperative that we speak directly to them.
The Ramseys are upstairs.
Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey, thank you for speaking with us. I understand this is a most difficult time, but clarity is essential to uncovering the truth. Let us start with the note. Mrs. Ramsey, you discovered this note first, correct? Could you recount how you came upon it?
I woke early, around 5 in the morning. I went downstairs to make coffee, and it was there, on the stairs. I read it, and immediately ran to wake John.
Understandable. And upon reading it, your first thought was to call the police.
Well, yes, but the note said not to call anyone. It said they'd kill her if we did.
Indeed, a calculated threat, but one that you ignored when you called 911. Why the change of heart?
Because I couldn't just sit there. I had to do something.
Mr. Ramsey, you found your daughter's body in the basement. Could you describe what led you there?
I couldn't sit idle. The police were upstairs searching. I thought maybe they'd missed something. I went to the basement and there she was.
You carried her upstairs, yes? Wrapped in a blanket?
Yes, I couldn't leave her there like that.
And the window, Mr. Ramsey, the broken window in the basement. Do you recall how it came to be broken?
I broke it myself weeks ago. I forgot my keys and had to force my way in. It wasn't fixed yet.
How fortunate, then, that an intruder would choose that very window.
Mrs. Ramsey, you mentioned waking early. Did you hear anything unusual during the night?
No, nothing. It was quiet. Too quiet, maybe.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey. Your cooperation has been most illuminating. Watson, a word, if you please. Detective, will you join us as well?
Holmes, they seem grief-stricken, but something feels off.
Quite so, Watson. The contradictions in their account are subtle, but they are there. The father's explanation of the broken window, for instance, does it not strike you as curiously convenient?
And the note, Holmes. She ignored its instructions, but with good reason. Do you believe her?
I believe she acted out of desperation, but desperation can stem from many sources, Watson. The question remains, desperation to find her daughter, or desperation to cover the truth? Detective, their statements raise as many questions as they answer.
So you think they're involved?
The question, Detective, is not only who is responsible, but why. Desperation can manifest in curious ways, and fear often drives the most elaborate deceptions. I recommend we reflect further before drawing conclusions.
You're right, no sense rushing this. It's been a long day for all of us.
Indeed, we shall retire for the evening, gather our thoughts, and meet again in the morning to discuss our findings. A fresh perspective often reveals what fatigue obscures.
An excellent suggestion, Holmes. I could use some rest after all this.
Gentlemen, please sit down. Now that we've had time to think, what's your verdict?
Detective, the evidence suggests a tragic chain of events driven by fear. The note, the window, and even the discovery of the body. Each detail points inward to the household itself. This was not the work of an outsider.
It's a terrible thought, but the facts are undeniable. Someone in that home knows more than they've said.
And then I'll take this to the DA. It's not the conclusion I wanted, but it's the one we've got.
It's great to be home again. This affair in America has left me exhausted and troubled, Holmes. The death of a child is not acceptable in any circumstance. The thought of someone inside the home to be connected to the death of the child is quite disturbing.
Indeed, my dear Watson, indeed. However, we must remember the human condition, Watson, is a labyrinth, winding paths of fear, love, ambition, and regret. In cases such as these, one sees not the sharp lines of malice or innocence, but the blurred strokes of desperation. What drives a person to construct such intricate falsehoods, to shield themselves from the piercing gaze of truth? It is not always villainy, but the heart's fragile attempt to bear its burden. Yet in these acts of concealment, the truth suffocates, leaving only shadows where light might have prevailed. We are left then with questions, not answers. Sorrow, not resolution. The innocent suffer, while the guilty, if guilt can indeed be so easily defined, carry on with a weight they can neither abandon nor confess. Such is the tragedy of human frailty. Justice, dear Watson, is not always a clean cut through the fabric of deceit. It is a patchwork, imperfect and unfinished, left to the courts and the conscience of those who seek it. We can only present what we have uncovered, threads of truth in a web of lies, and hope that it is enough to hold against the tides of ignorance and fear. And so this case concludes not with triumph, but with the bitter taste of understanding. The world is no less cruel, no less mysterious for our efforts, but we press on, Watson, for the pursuit of truth is its own reward, a light that must never be extinguished, no matter how dark the path may seem.
And so concludes this chapter in the timeless investigations of Sherlock Holmes. We thank you, dear listener, for lending us your time and imagination as we delved into the shadows of this modern mystery. Your thoughts and insights are invaluable to us. If you have feedback on this tale or ideas for what mystery you'd like Holmes and Watson to tackle next, we invite you to share them. After all, the game is always afoot, and your suggestions could be the key to unlocking our next adventure. Thank you once again for joining us on this journey. Until the next mystery calls, may your own path be clear and your curiosity unyielding.